I read so much because that was like our form of currency growing up. Like my brothers and I, like my dad wanted us to.
Neverland Ranch stood as a dazzling dreamscape where fantasy and reality intertwined. A sprawling, whimsical kingdom filled with laughter, music, and childlike wonder. With its private theme park rides spinning under open skies and a menagerie of exotic animals roaming freely, it was a place that seemed pulled straight from the pages of a fairy tale. To the public, Neverland was a symbol of joy and escape, a magical refuge crafted by Michael Jackson himself. Yet beneath its bright, enchanting surface, something sinister was unfolding. It would take years for the horrifying truth to surface. Now, even Michael Jackson's own daughter has broken her silence on the mysterious upstairs in Neverland. Let's start from the very beginning. Life and career of Michael Jackson. Born on August 29, 1958 in Gary, Indiana, Michael Joseph Jackson was the eighth of 10 children in the Jackson family. His mother, Katherine Jackson, was a devout Jehovah's Witness. Her spiritual grounding and encouragement played a pivotal role in Michael's early exposure to music and performance. In contrast, his father, Joseph Jackson, brought demanding and often harsh methods, sometimes described as abusive, to the table. From an early age, Michael's life was far from ordinary. Despite the difficulties he faced at home, including the pressure to excel and the strict rules imposed by his father, Michael found refuge and purpose in music. At just 6 years old, he joined his older brothers Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, Marlon, and later Randy, to form the Jackson 5. Their humble beginnings involved performing in local clubs, talent shows, and even unusual venues like roller rinks and small theaters, as they worked tirelessly to gain recognition. These early performances were grueling but crucial, honing Michael's skills as a vocalist and dancer. Though it was not apparent at the time, it laid the groundwork for his later stardom. The Jackson 5's breakthrough came in 1967 when they won Amateur Night at the Apollo Theater in Harlem. This victory helped them secure a deal with Motown Records, the legendary label that became synonymous with Black American music during that era. Under Motown, the Jackson 5 exploded onto the national scene with chart-topping hits like I Want You Back, ABC, and I'll Be There. The Jackson 5 became a cultural phenomenon, breaking racial barriers on television and in the music industry during a time when America was still grappling with civil rights issues. As Michael grew older, his ambitions extended beyond the group. By the mid-1970s, he was ready to embark on a solo career that would redefine pop music. This transition coincided with a move from Motown to Epic Records, where Michael found increased creative control. This was a rarity for young black artists at the time. It was at Epic that Michael met producer Quincy Jones. This collaboration would prove transformative. Their partnership began with the 1979 release of Off the Wall, Michael's first adult solo album. The record was a critical and commercial success, blending pop, funk, and disco in ways that resonated with a wide audience. Tracks like Don't Stop Till You Get Enough and Rock With You became instant classics, earning Michael his first Grammy Award as a solo artist. Off the Wall marked a significant turning point, showing the world that Michael was more than just the kid from the Jackson 5. He was a powerful solo force. But it was Michael's next album, released in 1982, that would cement his status as a global icon. Thriller was a groundbreaking masterpiece that shattered records and transformed the music industry. With Quincy Jones's visionary production and Michael's unparalleled creativity, Thriller combined pop, rock, R&B, and even elements of horror in its music videos and themes. The album produced a string of hit singles such as Billie Jean, Beat It, and Thriller, each accompanied by innovative cinematic videos that redefined the medium. What followed was a continuous ascent into cultural superstardom. Michael Jackson didn't simply dominate the charts, he changed the entire landscape of popular music and performance. By the time Bad was released in 1987, the pressure to outdo Thriller was immense. Yet Michael delivered an album that further expanded his artistic range. With Bad, he took more creative control, co-writing most of the songs and pushing his image and sound into edgier territory. The title track, along with Smooth Criminal, Man in the Mirror, and The Way You Make Me Feel, showcased his versatility, ranging from social commentary to sultry pop anthems. The accompanying world tour broke attendance records globally and positioned Michael not just as an entertainer, but as a global ambassador of pop culture. The short film-like music videos continued, and with the rise of MTV, his visual influence was as strong as his sonic one. He was no longer just a chart-topping artist. He was a singular phenomenon. By the early 1990s, Michael had become a symbol of artistic perfection and personal mystery, with his every move scrutinized by a fascinated and often critical public. In 1991, he released Dangerous, a stylistic shift away from Quincy Jones's sound toward the new Jack Swing production of Teddy Riley. The album contained the global smash, Black or White, a call for racial harmony, and Remember the Time, which showcased African-inspired visual storytelling. The short films for Dangerous singles were bigger and more ambitious than ever, including cutting-edge morphing technology and Hollywood-level production. Jackson's performance at the Super Bowl XXVII halftime show in 1993 was a cultural moment in itself. He stood motionless for over a minute before delivering a medley that redefined what a halftime show could be. This was arguably his artistic peak, commercially invincible, visually groundbreaking, and socially resonant. Yet, 1993 also marked the beginning of a different kind of attention, one focused less on the music and more on the man behind the mask, signaling the start of a decade where controversy would increasingly compete with creativity in defining Michael Jackson's public identity. The 1993 child abuse allegations. The controversy began with Jackson's relationship with Jordan Chandler, a 13-year-old boy whose family lived near the Neverland Ranch in Santa Barbara County, California. Their friendship began warmly, with Jackson acting as a mentor figure who introduced Jordan to a world of fantasy and fun. Jordan's father, Evan Chandler, initially seemed supportive, but soon became a central figure in the unfolding events. In August 1993, Evan Chandler shocked Jackson by demanding millions of dollars in exchange for not publicly accusing Jackson of child molestation. Such an accusation alone threatened to destroy Jackson's career and legacy. When Jackson refused to pay the amount outside the legal system, the Chandlers filed a civil lawsuit for child abuse. This triggered a private investigation, during which Jackson vehemently denied all allegations. The situation became murkier as Jordan Chandler's own statements appeared inconsistent. Psychiatric experts who evaluated Jordan reached conflicting conclusions, with some questioning the veracity of his claims, while others found indications of trauma. This divide fueled suspicion and confusion. As media scrutiny intensified, the matter escalated from private negotiations into public allegations, leading to a formal police investigation. Authorities searched Neverland Ranch, Jackson's homes in Los Angeles, and elsewhere looking for evidence to support the allegations. The scrutiny was unprecedented for a global superstar. Despite the high-profile investigations, the evidence remained inconclusive. One focus was on certain art books found at Neverland, some containing drawings and writings that authorities questioned. But nothing definitive emerged linking Jackson to criminal wrongdoing. No physical evidence or eyewitness testimonies provided the smoking gun prosecutors sought. Jackson's legal team argued that the accusations were baseless and motivated by financial gain. During this period, Jackson refused to settle any criminal charges, choosing instead to fight the allegations in court. This decision led to a prolonged legal battle that drained both his finances and his emotional well-being. The stress was palpable as Jackson maintained his innocence. In early 1994, to avoid the uncertainties of a criminal trial, Jackson agreed to settle the civil lawsuit filed by Jordan Chandler and his parents. The settlement amounted to $15 million to Jordan and an additional $3 million to his parents. This sum sparked intense debate and speculation. Most notably, Jackson's settlement explicitly stated that it was not an admission of guilt. Many observers interpreted the settlement as a pragmatic move to end a damaging episode quickly. Critics, however, saw it as a tacit admission, while supporters argued it was a strategy to protect Jackson's children and reputation. Following the civil settlement, the criminal case faced further hurdles. In 1994, both the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office and a grand jury reviewed the case but ultimately declined to press charges due to insufficient evidence. The case against Jackson was dropped quietly, though the shadow it cast on his public image remained for years to come. Jackson publicly stated that the experience had been devastating and called it a nightmare fueled by false accusations. He emphasized his commitment to children's welfare, continuing to advocate for children's charities and causes, hoping to restore his reputation. But things did not end here. The 2005 child abuse trial. The controversies that had haunted him since the early 1990s were reignited once again. This renewed storm was largely triggered by the 2003 documentary Living with Michael Jackson, directed by British journalist Martin Bashir. The film showcased Jackson's interactions with children, including a moment where he held hands with a young boy. The documentary's portrayal was seen by many as controversial and unsettling, leading to intense scrutiny and reopening of allegations against the pop icon. This set the stage for a renewed legal assault, this time led by authorities in Santa Barbara County, California, where Jackson's Neverland Ranch was located. In November 2003, formal charges were filed against Michael Jackson by the Santa Barbara District Attorney's Office. He faced 7 counts of child molestation and 2 counts of furnishing alcohol to a minor, all allegations linked to Gavin Arvizo, a teenager who had spent time at Neverland Ranch. These charges marked a serious escalation from the civil and informal investigations of a decade earlier. It thrust Jackson back into the center of a global media storm. The property in question, Neverland Ranch, was officially known as the Sycamore Valley Ranch. Jackson purchased it in 1988 for approximately $17 million. Nestled in the Santa Ynez Valley of Santa Barbara County, California, the sprawling estate covered around 2,700 acres. It was originally developed by real estate magnate William Bone, but Jackson transformed it into an iconic fusion of private residence and a fantasy world. Inspired by the mythical island from Peter Pan, where children never grow up, Jackson's Neverland became both a personal refuge and a symbol of his complex persona. Part childlike dreamer, part elusive global superstar. The property boasted a main house designed in a French Normandy style, with 5 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, 3 fireplaces, and over 12,000 square feet of interior space. But it was what lay beyond the walls that made Neverland legendary. The estate included its own amusement park, complete with a Ferris wheel, carousel, pirate ship ride, bumper cars, and a miniature railway that circled the property. There was also a petting zoo with exotic animals like elephants, llamas, and giraffes, as well as a movie theater with a private box for sick children and candy dispensers built into the seats. Security and privacy were paramount at Neverland. The entrance was guarded by a massive wrought iron gate, and the entire estate was surrounded by fencing, cameras, and personnel. A security team worked around the clock, and staff had to abide by strict confidentiality agreements. Visitors passed under an arched Neverland sign and often took golf carts or trains to move about the massive estate. The interior of the home, especially the upstairs areas, remained largely off-limits to most guests. Jackson's bedroom suite included multiple rooms and a private security alarm system. The ranch was not merely a home, but also a stage for Jackson's philanthropic efforts. He invited underprivileged and terminally ill children to visit and enjoy the facilities free of charge. Publicly, Neverland became emblematic of Jackson's proclaimed desire to recreate the childhood he felt he had missed. In his 1995 interview with Diane Sawyer, he described it as a place of healing and joy, saying, "I do it because I genuinely love them, and I want to help." However, Neverland also became a central location in the 1993 and 2003 child abuse investigations. Law enforcement conducted thorough searches of the property, including the private quarters and the secret rooms some claimed were hidden within. The 2003 raid, following the airing of the Living with Michael Jackson documentary, was particularly extensive, with over 70 investigators sweeping through the estate. Some media outlets later exaggerated or misrepresented what was found, contributing to public speculation and myth-making about secret compartments or inappropriate behavior. Later testimonies revealed that some so-called secret rooms were actually designed for security purposes and not the sinister hideouts tabloids suggested. From the outset of this new investigation, Jackson adamantly denied all accusations, consistently proclaiming his innocence. His legal team worked vigorously to dismantle the prosecution's case, while Jackson himself maintained a calm yet resolute stance, emphasizing his commitment to children's welfare and asserting that his relationships with young fans were based on kindness and generosity. The trial that followed in early 2005 became a spectacle unlike any other, attracting intense worldwide media coverage. Courtrooms overflowed with journalists, cameras, and spectators, reflecting the global fascination with the case. For Jackson, the trial was a source of immense personal strain, taking a toll on his health and well-being. He appeared frail at times, visibly affected by the prolonged stress and public scrutiny. The courtroom drama stretched over several months, with testimonies from both sides painting drastically different pictures. The defense presented the allegations as a calculated attempt by the Arvizo family to exploit Jackson's fame for financial gain. They argued that the teenager and his family had repeatedly tried to extort money from Jackson. Conversely, the prosecution portrayed a darker narrative, asserting that Jackson used his star power to manipulate and abuse vulnerable children. They suggested that the lavish lifestyle and gifts Jackson provided were part of a coercive strategy, creating an environment where the alleged abuse could occur unchecked. The jury was presented with detailed accounts, expert testimonies, and conflicting statements that made the trial a complex legal puzzle. The defense's strategy to highlight inconsistencies in the accuser's story and point to prior failed extortion attempts proved crucial. Jackson's longtime friends and employees testified in his favor, portraying him as a caring, gentle figure deeply committed to children's happiness and safety. After months of tense proceedings, the trial concluded with the jury's verdict on June 13, 2005. In a decision that shocked many but vindicated Jackson legally, he was acquitted on all charges. The verdict was a pivotal moment, signaling the end of a grueling ordeal and a formal restoration of Jackson's legal innocence. Yet, despite the acquittal, the case left deep scars on his public image. The media had sensationalized the trial from the start, and the accusations had already seeped into popular consciousness, altering the way many viewed the pop star. For all the legal closure, the cloud of suspicion lingered. Years later, the FBI released extensive investigation files related to both the 1993 and 2005 allegations. These documents revealed that federal authorities found no evidence sufficient to charge Jackson with any wrongdoing in either case. Despite this, the damage to Jackson's reputation had already been done. By the time of Jackson's 2005 trial, Neverland had become as much a courtroom exhibit as it was a home. Prosecutors and defense attorneys both used images, floor plans, and footage of the property to support their arguments. Jackson stopped living at Neverland after the trial, stating that he felt the home had been violated by the intense scrutiny and invasive searches. In 2006, the estate was closed, the amusement rides were dismantled, and staff were dismissed. Despite its decline, Neverland remained in the headlines. In 2008, amid mounting financial trouble, Jackson defaulted on the loan for the property. Colony Capital, a real estate investment company, acquired the loan and eventually gained partial ownership. After Jackson died in 2009, fans around the world called for Neverland to be turned into a public memorial, much like Graceland is for Elvis Presley. However, the Jackson family never approved such a transformation. In 2015, the estate was put up for sale under its original name, Sycamore Valley Ranch, with an asking price of $100 million, though it eventually sold in 2020 for $22 million to billionaire Ron Burkle, a family friend of Jackson. By then, Neverland had become less of a sanctuary and more of a symbol of Jackson's fame, his eccentricity, and the conflicting narratives that continue to surround his life and legacy. Post-trial financial problems. Following the emotional and highly publicized 2005 trial, Michael Jackson faced an equally daunting battle with financial struggles that contrasted starkly with his decades of unparalleled success and stardom. Despite being one of the most influential and best-selling artists in music history, Jackson's financial profile was severely strained, reflecting years of costly legal defenses, extravagant spending, and a series of ill-fated business ventures that failed to stabilize his situation. The financial pressures were compounded by ongoing lawsuits. At one point, nearly 47 civil suits were active against him, in a bid to escape the relentless media attention and find some respite. Jackson relocated in 2006 to Bahrain, where he was hosted as a guest by Sheikh Abdullah bin Hamad Al Khalifa. Yet, even in this new setting, Jackson's financial woes continued to mount. Attempts at business reinvention through partnerships and ventures in music and entertainment largely fell short. Several deals, touted with much fanfare, either collapsed or failed to generate sufficient revenue to offset mounting debts. What had once been a near mythical fortune now teetered dangerously close to collapse. One of the most telling indicators of Jackson's financial distress was the use of his valuable music catalog as collateral to secure loans. His catalog, which included rights to some of the most iconic songs ever recorded, both his solo works and those with the Jackson 5, remained his most significant tangible asset. By the mid-2000s, Jackson owed approximately $270 million to Bank of America alone. The bank later sold this debt to Fortress Investments, a private equity firm, which further complicated his financial arrangements. Advisors warned Jackson that if he did not take drastic steps, including selling off portions of his music rights, he risked complete financial ruin. Under this pressure, Jackson reluctantly agreed to a series of new loans, and financial counsel recommended that he sell up to half of his music catalog rights to avoid total bankruptcy. This decision marked a painful turning point, as it meant parting with the very foundation of his artistic legacy. Despite the heartache, Jackson seemed aware of the necessity, recognizing that preserving his career and lifestyle required difficult sacrifices. Yet, even these measures were not enough to fully stem the tide of creditors and legal claims. His financial advisors consistently cautioned him about the precariousness of his situation. One of the most visible symbols of this retrenchment was the closure of Neverland Ranch, the sprawling Santa Barbara estate that had long been Jackson's primary residence and a public emblem of his whimsical and reclusive lifestyle. Throughout this difficult period, Jackson's situation was further complicated by a series of public financial disputes and media reports that painted a portrait of near bankruptcy. The tension between his immense cultural influence and his fragile financial health became a central narrative of his later years. Industry insiders and financial experts alike noted the irony of a man whose music continued to generate billions in revenue worldwide, but who personally struggled to manage the business side of his legacy. Some pointed to a lack of consistent financial oversight and the cumulative impact of past spending habits, while others suggested that Jackson's desire to maintain control over his life and career sometimes hindered effective financial decision-making. Despite the setbacks, Jackson's music continued to command global attention, and his name remained a powerful brand. But behind the scenes, the stark realities of his fiscal situation cast a long shadow. The juxtaposition of the public's enduring love for the King of Pop and the private unraveling of his financial empire revealed the complexities and vulnerabilities of a legendary artist grappling with the consequences of fame, legal battles, and financial mismanagement. In many ways, these challenges framed the final chapters of Jackson's life. Michael Jackson's death and legal aftermath. Michael Jackson's death on June 25, 2009, sent shockwaves across the globe, marking the sudden end of an era. At just 50 years old, Jackson was a cultural icon whose career spanned over 4 decades, shaping the sound and spectacle of pop music like no other artist before or since. The news of his passing in Los Angeles was met with an outpouring of grief from fans worldwide, with vigils held in cities from London to Tokyo, reflecting the deep connection people felt to the King of Pop. The official investigation into Jackson's death culminated in August 2009 with a ruling from the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, declaring the cause of death a homicide. The coroner's report identified acute propofol intoxication combined with benzodiazepines, sedatives that had been administered by Jackson's personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray. Propofol, a powerful anesthetic typically used in hospital operating rooms, was being used in an unorthodox manner to help Jackson sleep. This ultimately proved fatal. The legal ramifications of the coroner's findings were swift and significant. In February 2010, Conrad Murray was formally charged with involuntary manslaughter. The indictment accused him of administering the lethal dose of propofol and failing to provide adequate care, which directly led to Jackson's death. The trial attracted intense media scrutiny. Given Jackson's global stature and the extraordinary circumstances of his passing, over the months of courtroom proceedings, the prosecution portrayed Murray as negligent and reckless, while the defense argued that Jackson had self-administered the substance and that Murray's actions, though flawed, did not amount to criminal behavior. The 2011 trial unfolded against a backdrop of relentless public interest. Witness testimonies revealed glimpses into Jackson's fragile health, the pressures he faced in preparing for his anticipated "This Is It" comeback concerts, and the complicated dynamics between the pop star and his doctor. Ultimately, the jury found Conrad Murray guilty of involuntary manslaughter, leading to a sentence of 4 years in prison. Murray served less than 2 years before being released on good behavior. While the criminal proceedings marked the close of Jackson's legal saga, the aftermath of his death saw a profound intensification of his musical and cultural legacy. In death, Jackson's influence only grew. Despite the intense media scrutiny surrounding his death and the controversies it unearthed, Michael Jackson's impact on music, dance, and global pop culture remains undeniable. His artistry, innovation, and humanitarian efforts continue to inspire new generations, while his story serves as a cautionary tale about the costs of fame and the vulnerabilities behind the glittering surface of celebrity. But not all has been good and bright for Jackson's legacy. Posthumous allegations and Paris, Jackson's revelations. In the years following Michael Jackson's death, new allegations of child abuse emerged that reignited fierce controversy around the late pop icon's legacy. In 2013, Wade Robson, a choreographer and longtime Jackson family friend, publicly accused Jackson of abuse during his childhood. The following year, James Safechuck came forward with similar allegations. Despite the public uproar, the legal system initially posed significant barriers to the accusers. Many of the lawsuits filed by Robson and Safechuck were dismissed on procedural grounds, primarily due to statutes of limitations that prevent claims filed too long after the alleged incidents. Additionally, the courts found that the plaintiffs lacked direct affiliation with Jackson's business entities, which complicated efforts to hold the estate or corporations liable. These dismissals, however, did little to quell the controversy. The controversy reached a new peak in 2019 with the release of Leaving Neverland, a documentary that gave Robson and Safechuck a platform to share detailed personal accounts of their alleged abuse. Directed by Dan Reed, the film reignited public debate, drawing both condemnation and support. It presented the narrative of Jackson as a complex figure whose extraordinary talent was intertwined with troubling personal behavior, provoking strong reactions from fans, critics, and cultural commentators alike. Several radio stations across the world temporarily removed Jackson's music from their playlists in response, while broadcasters and streaming platforms wrestled with the ethical dilemma of separating art from the artist. Amid the backlash, Jackson's family and close associates mounted a vigorous defense of his name. Katherine Jackson and other family members condemned the documentary as a public lynching and vehemently denied the allegations, describing them as fabricated and opportunistic. Prominent peers in the music industry also voiced support for Jackson's innocence, highlighting his philanthropic efforts and the testimony of numerous people who had known him personally. Counter-documentaries and investigative reports were produced to challenge the claims presented in Leaving Neverland. Interestingly, despite the wave of negative publicity, Michael Jackson's music experienced a resurgence in sales and streaming numbers following the scandal. This paradox highlighted the enduring power of his artistry and the complicated relationship fans had with his legacy. Over time, some radio stations reinstated his songs into rotation, signaling a degree of reconciliation with the artist's work, even as questions lingered about his personal life. The legal battle extended beyond public discourse, as Jackson's estate launched a $100 million lawsuit against HBO, the broadcaster behind Leaving Neverland, alleging defamation and breach of contract. The suit claimed the network had failed to provide the estate with a chance to respond before airing the film, asserting that the documentary contained misleading and false information. In 2020, California passed a significant legislative change, extending the statute of limitations for child abuse claims, creating a look-back window that allowed survivors to bring cases regardless of how much time had elapsed. This development opened the door for renewed legal challenges against the Michael Jackson estate, which faced new trials and claims years after the star's passing. By 2023, courts had approved the resumption of some of these lawsuits. The revived cases are now set to proceed to trial, with proceedings scheduled for 2026. Both plaintiffs have expressed their intent to seek justice through the legal system. The Jackson estate continues to deny the allegations, asserting that they are motivated by financial gain and lack credible evidence. In the end, Michael Jackson's public image and the legend of Neverland Ranch remain tangled in admiration, myth, and controversy, each reinforcing the other across decades. Widely hailed as the king of pop, Jackson's musical genius and global influence are undisputed. Yet his legacy is also shadowed by repeated allegations and sensational media coverage that fueled public division. Neverland, his iconic estate in Santa Barbara County, stood as a grand manifestation of childlike wonder, filled with amusement rides, a zoo, and whimsical architecture, but it also became the center of endless speculation. In fact, in 2017, Paris Jackson broke her silence on the matter and said that the estate's upper levels were places of music, rehearsals, and fatherly warmth, an image far removed from the darker insinuations. Security features and restricted areas did exist, largely as protective measures for an intensely private individual overwhelmed by fame, rather than evidence of secrecy. Much of the intrigue around Neverland was shaped by sensational journalism, which often eclipsed nuance and truth in favor of dramatic narrative. Yet, despite the controversies, Neverland remains a lasting emblem of Jackson's complex duality, a symbol of both innocence and isolation, of brilliance and burden, and of a man whose reality was often drowned out by the myth surrounding him. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.